My theme is confinement. I actually began exploring the theme in a more literal sense. I focused on pieces that would sort of show off my very technical ability. I wanted to do observational work, like a lot of it was in my process. But as we went online, as we moved to online school, I think that a lot of the work became a lot more, I guess, real. And well, a lot of my pieces were inspired by the way I was feeling during the entire period of time. I've been in boarding for the last 4 years, and so going back home for such a long period of time sort of made me, I guess, get in touch with my family again and the city that I was from, and so a lot of my pieces are based on that. More specifically, some of the pieces which I think have more clearly depicted confinement would probably be my take on the farmers' protest in India, and so that was me looking at it, looking at something that I actually thought was interesting, something that I didn't have any, I guess, personal connection with until I actually went and did research and understood what I had to do. But I think after I went back home much later, I spent more time with my grandparents, spent more time with, I guess, where I'm from, which is Mysore, and a lot of my other work, some of my other pieces were sort of based more on that specifically. I think that I wanted to capture this idea of confinement in a way that doesn't really seem like confinement at all. Something like aging, something like, I guess, without even knowing that you're in a confined situation, I guess, something like that. A lot of my work is me trying to reflect this theme in as many different ways as possible. And I think that only towards the end of quarantine I could really come back and say that I want to do a piece about myself and about how, where, and when I feel confined. And so I decided to focus on something which was such a, I guess, big topic in art, in literature, etc., which is anxiety. But I feel like I never really related to the topic until I guess I was in a situation like that myself. And so I find figuring out a way to sort of bring across that feeling without looking at it too literally, without focusing on it in a very generic sense. That was a very fun, I guess, exciting thing for me. I don't generally work with a lot of symbolism and metaphors, but this piece specifically, I tried my best to do that. I tried my best to sort of give the viewer a visual understanding of the feeling that I was feeling instead of, I guess, more logical understanding.
Alright, so the theme I've chosen for my exhibition is collections. I feel like that's pretty interesting because I've always been drawn to making like large series of artworks. I think it's really interesting how much you can push one format and explore the same subject in different ways and kind of connect them with each other. I also think that in a series of artwork, a lot of times the pieces kind of interact with each other and kind of bring more of a fuller picture, and that's what I'm trying to bring with these pieces. So for example, the mediums that I've like kind of presented really strongly here are photography and digital. So like over here, like I have this piece called My Mother's Bureau, and it's a series of objects my mother owns, and I kind of want to represent how these collections of things can like kind of build the essence of a person, and that's also something I've pushed in my illustration as well. For example, I have this series of illustrations that I've explored what people keep in their bags all day and what that says about them. And then I also think that photography and digital art can be combined. So over here with photography, I've explored taking like really close-up pictures, but another thing I want to explore is taking like really far away shots of my city, because I feel like that's an interesting thing to collect. So I've gone around my neighborhood taking pictures, kind of drawn onto them in this series called A Copious Amount of Things That Aren't Really There, where I kind of want to like bring an imaginative and childlike curiosity to places I know really well. And then I also liked pushing photography and my digital work together in the zine I've designed, where I kind of want to embed them into digital formats. And then I've added words of my own reflections to show how I feel about them, and then collected them into this 8-page zine. I've also like tried to add more organic effort by drawing over them, scratching out lines to just show how I feel differently about different things, even if it's all part of the same subjects. I can combine how I feel about them. And then even through illustration, I've tried to bring across this idea of collections. I have a set of postcards, I have a set of panels. In my collage boxes, I've explored imagery and typography together to kind of create a slightly chaotic representation of the way I think. And I think this sort of experience is something I want to be represented across my exhibition. Even in my ink drawings, where I've drawn a series of portraits of my mother, or I've done an exploration of different types of moths combined together, I do want to explore my interests in portraiture, but in the form of collections, so you can see how something can shift slightly with each iteration that I explored through my artwork.
My theme is stories, myths, and legends. I chose this theme because I wanted to do a lot of paintings around my family, and I actually started by doing Greek myths. So the easiest way I could lead from Greek myths into like family stories was to do something that kind of like wrapped around the whole thing. So that's how I came about the idea of stories, myths, and legends. A lot of my pieces have to do with either memories, my family, or like again Greek myths. So a lot of my paintings actually are pictures of myself or my mom, and have a lot of elements that relate back to my grandparents. As for my Greek mythology pieces, I did pomegranates to kind of go with the story of Persephone and the underworld, and the pomegranates are kind of like a very like symbolic thing in this story. So, which is again a reason that I put those in my pieces. The collage pieces and the big dreamscape pieces are actually kind of memories, and they're also supposed to bring like an idea of like travel, and like they're talking about like they're both okay. So they're modeled off of a place that I went to once that had these beautiful big colored walls, and so I kind of wanted to bring an idea of that and make it like abstract and kind of bring into an idea of like dreams and like an idea of that. Like you don't really know what's going on, and it's not supposed to make a lot of sense, and it's supposed to tell the story of like travel and then colors, and it's supposed to bring like a space idea of sorts. So that's some of those pieces, and then my installation piece is actually dedicated to my mom and my grandmother, and I used a sari that was owned by my grandmother and kind of made it seem like it was attached to the painting and that the model in the painting is wearing it. And it kind of flows out and connects to a painting of my mother. There is also a hand holding the sari, which is meant to seem as if it's stitching a lace border back onto the sari, which kind of goes with the story of my grandmother, because when she got the sari, she was the one who stitched the border onto it. So through my installation piece, I'm kind of bringing about like those elements and that story, and yeah, so try to tell like a very familiar and family story.
So my theme is home, and I wanted to sort of encompass what home means to me. Like, it's not just my house, like the house that I grew up in or my hometown. It's also mainly the people that I grew up with. So that's why a lot of my exhibition consists of portraits of different family members and just even of myself. So I created many portraits of my mother, my grandmother, like even a little sculpture with my dad and I, just to sort of capture all these like moments and these memories and like even my culture, which all sort of encompasses to form my idea of home. And when audiences come to see my work, I ideally want them to sort of see the warmth of my pieces and just sort of kind of understand like the love I have for each person that I've illustrated, or even in this piece with the map that I've made of my hometown. I want them to sort of link I want them to sort of empathize with my idea of home and also link it to what they believe their idea of home is. So I wanted to sort of evoke feelings of nostalgia and just warmth and just general goodness. Also in many of my pieces I loved playing around with colors and textures because I just think I kind of link that all back to my mother and growing up in a very like Indian Bengali household where I was just surrounded by all these, you know, textiles and textures and colors everywhere. So that links back to my idea of home. So I used lots of bright colors. I used oil pastels in many of my portraits, and even in one of my oil paintings I bedazzled them with little jewels to really just bring out like the opulence of Indian culture. This piece in particular is this piece of the portrait of the man with the map. It's called Hometown, and it's my favorite because I have just illustrated the city that I have spent my entire life in, and I took a lot of time meticulously outlining every street that I have frequented, and that just has been memorized in my brain now. And the little dot in the man's eye marks my house. So I don't know, I just wanted to encompass this idea of home throughout the exhibition.
As a child, car rides and drives was something I always looked forward to, watching the world zoom by and then come to a halt before gaining speed again. This was evocative of reality to me, of how life is like a roller coaster which will have its highs and lows. As I was driven to my mum's fashion studio, I experienced two worlds. One raw, full of garbage, pollution and roadside dump, and one full of poise and elegance as my mother micromanaged each thread which was sewn into her garments. Both appealed to me. Both appealed to my eyes and heart. As a feminist and aspiring creative artist, Coco Chanel was bound to be my icon, my inspiration. From a young age, my art always contained a message to empower women. Subconsciously, unknowingly, I was aware of the patriarchy prevalent in society and was working to break through, to create a more equal and inclusive world. As my artworks revolved around women empowerment, my eyes and mind shared a liking for mundane activities as the objects were made symbolic. Objectification automatically became my theme. The objectification of women, of viewing them as objects of desire, of objects creating meaning and being associated with gender. My work aims to empower women through visuals which often cause them to question, to demand change. As a person who chases perfection, who loves details, each element in my artwork has a meaning. Several layers to invoke different options and perspectives. Leftover used items somehow catch my eye over sparkly polished surfaces. The rawness and reality which it embodies tells its own stories. As viewers look onto everyday objects with elements interwoven, they question conventional thoughts and stereotypes placed by society. Some of my works mix physical mediums with digital elements to showcase that even though we're moving ahead in terms of technology and innovation, who are still lagging behind in societal scenarios, barely making any improvements in the way women are treated as the rates of rape cases rise every day.
So my theme for my exhibition was dearth, which basically means the lack of something or scarcity, and I chose to interpret this through metaphorical meanings and actual physical things that we lack. So for example, some of my pieces focus on the lack of water and the lack of food, while through others I took a more emotional approach and chose to talk about how we lack emotion and our lack of reality through dreams and stuff like that. The process was quite interesting as I chose to use a variety of mediums for my work. For some pieces I use more traditional techniques, such as the piece Josh, for which I used the traditional Japanese printing method called gyutaku, which involves me using a real fish and inks while printing on fabric or cloth. And another piece which I think was the highlight of my exhibition was a scissor, which was inspired by many other artists who do larger-than-life sculptural works. This piece basically focuses on the lack of freedom of expression, as it's a scissor cutting through words such as beliefs, values, and opinions. It took a lot of time to make this piece, and I positioned it at the center of my exhibition because it made my exhibition more interactive as people had to go through my exhibition. Another one of my favorite pieces was, again, a metaphorical interpretation of my theme, which was terms and conditions, which focuses on the lack of privacy we have, especially being a generation where a lot of our life is online. I represented it through a window and a person peering in. Another, I think, a common aspect for many of my pieces was food, which is seen in two of my pieces, and they both are starkly contrasting, as one talks about abundance, while another highlights the issue of starvation and wastage. And for both of them I used similar hyper-realistic techniques, but I also placed them along with each other so that people could actually realize the wastage that is being faced in terms of food. So in general, a lot of my exhibition highlighted the same theme, but the pieces being so starkly different, I used the descriptions to actually give small interpretations of my personal connections, which just tied everything into my theme.
So my theme is courage in yourself. This is because I've decided it after the whole process of my art exhibition. So in the beginning of my IB course, as an art student, I created some of the pieces which were related with my family, because that's where I come from, and I really wanted to explore the concept of love. But since pandemic happened, and now I was really influenced by COVID-19. So the situation made me progress in completely different way from what I was supposed to. So I started producing pieces about COVID, which is like any side, one of my pieces. So it contains my emotions and feelings that I felt while staying at school during the lockdown, where everyone else went back to their home, but I was the few student who stayed back at school. So I was really frustrated at the beginning, and I lost myself sometimes, and I got out of my track, but I started making a piece to motivate myself and inspire myself from this bad situation. So I started creating a piece to show my recover from the situation, which can be if you flee. So it shows that I will anyways have to face all the situations and problems. So it's no good if I run away from any challenges. So I should rather take the challenge. And then I produced many other pieces which are related with Korea, because it comes from the concept of wanting, like, desire to go back to Korea. So and then I started thinking of myself as an individual. So I went into the concept of identity and standing for myself, and having courage to come over any challenges during any external negatively influenced situations. So some of my pieces are related with courage. So to cover all of my pieces, I decided the theme of courage in myself. So it's the message for myself as well as to the audience from my exhibition.
The theme my portfolio aims to represent is organizing chaos. When I first began reflecting about potential topics to choose from through an introspective study that our teacher conducted called Objects of Desire, I learned that basketball and art were key themes central to my life. However, my drawing style often incorporated organized, meticulously planned regions for each element that could not be breached. Keeping this in mind, I challenged myself to draw freehand pieces with lack of planning. Initially difficult to do, but inspiring me to take up organizing chaos as my central theme. Finding patterns in disorganized elements and bringing them back to organization questioned for me the nature of what is visually appealing. I created organized pieces such as Upheaval and Growth, and disorganized works like Jungle. I was motivated by the culture of creative minds around me, and through the 2 years, I experimented with various styles, sizes, and medias. The process of creation made pieces of me the centrally located piece of my exhibition, with the rest highlighting my development toward accepting chaos as a natural part of life. Pieces of me was my reflection of the varied things that bring me joy. In creating this piece, I used stippling, which forced me to look at the chaos embodied within the piece, yet bring my own sense of organization to the elements. Moving away from the piece, it was surrounded by 3 principal artworks. In the first, Comfort in Chaos, the discordant and messy impressionism makes us realize that the messy minor details only add to its artistic value. Conversely, Converging Oblivion is a color pencil piece that allows for a muted yet captivating statement about central foci organizing more chaotic axes. Lastly, Although our cow signifies a slow progression from organization to chaos in the natural world. The use of acrylics in this piece helped me make the tones opaque and concentrated. The way that the pieces were hung in the exhibition focuses on this central journey from pieces of me, which is a personal piece. In my opinion, the most engaging piece is Disguised Desire, whose multitudinous perspectives will allow for viewers to view that the ink on the paper is not unidimensional, but can rather present various perspectives of uniformity and confusion when seen from different angles and directions.
I think when it comes to my bodies of work, my style and my ideas have the perceptions that I had about my life have changed drastically. So the theme of transformation transpires through all the works that I've done, and it really stimulates parts of my life, the ideas about society, and the morals that we have within ourselves. Especially the piece which is right behind me, talking about my identity and my journey, both artistically and characteristically, about my life and how I have grown as a person. From being a boy just roaming around Uganda, all the way to coming to TISB India, which is my first home, and learning art. And I think the piece really emulates the artwork and the skills that I've learned. And it's not only about the skills that I've learned, but it's also about the experiences that I've had. And through those experiences, I feel that my art changes drastically from being simple abstract paintings and abstract installations, all the way to these dramatic pieces which are full of patterns and life. So I think when it came naturally to my pieces, I wanted the audience and the viewers to find it within themselves, to challenge their notions of their life, their identity, and their morals as a society, and find the real answers, the ones that we all look for. Who are we and what does our journey really mean?
So my main idea for my exhibition was to experiment with the environment I grew up in, as well as the environment I see around me. So a lot of my pieces are mixed media, and I also try to recycle and use natural elements. For example, my bougainvillea lights and my painting, I use real dried bougainvillea as well as coconut fibers and leaves from my garden. I also use newspapers as backgrounds and basically show how powerful recycling is in today's world. So my favorite piece from this exhibition is Industry versus Ecology, because it talks about the change that took place due to pollution, like what were the side effects of pollution and how it destroyed nature basically. And you can see this throughout the painting from the top to the bottom. So as you go down, you see that there's more life, and on top there are buildings and smoke and pollution. Another piece that I really enjoyed making was the Australian fire. This is a 4D experience because you can see the fire, you can smell it, and you can feel it. And the way I achieved this was I used smoke bombs to get the smoke. I used a heater so you can feel the heat, and my paintings obviously show the fire. And this too is a progress of the fire, before the fire, during the fire, and after the fire. And another piece I really enjoyed making was underwater. This, according to many people, everyone has a different interpretation of this painting. Some think it's a coral reef, some think it's an octopus, some people think it's a stingray. But basically, I used acrylic inks and used a blow dryer to extend the paint into thin lines to achieve a natural coral reef scene. So this other painting is about rape, and this is something I, as a feminist, am very strongly inclined about. So this was actually an assignment I set up on myself. I wanted to show a fix of a fix in society. How do we fix such a problem? So you can see that on one lip that someone is forced to close it. This shows the constrainment due to the wires. And the other lip is open, and this shows that people are starting to talk about rape. Usually in Indian society, this is forbidden because the family or India would be declared unsafe. So this is a change I want to show, and how people started standing up to each other and for other females. Yeah.
Good colors.